Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Xbox One X and see how this particular gaming console holds up in 2025. Now, the big thing I can definitely tell you, right, is that with the Xbox One X, this is one of those types of consoles that I think still holds up fairly well for the most part. It may not be perfect, but I do think if you are in the market and you're looking at a newer console to buy, well, if you've never owned an Xbox or an Xbox One in general, this is a very decent console that can give you a lot of capability and a lot of power to play those Xbox One games and to even play some backwards compatible games and have a really good experience with. So with that being said, I just kind of want to get that out of the way, because when you're going to go through and kind of pick up one of these types of consoles, these are still very capable, very powerful machines, and I do think that is a very important thing to keep in mind. So if you want to pick up the Xbox One or any of these other consoles I'm going to talk about, links will be down in the description below. You can go get it from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the exterior of the Xbox One X, this console originally came out back a couple of years ago. So it didn't just come out today, it's been out for a few years now, since 2017. So we're approaching like 8 years now that this console's been out. So that is kind of a pretty big thing to keep in mind. When it comes down to both of these though, right, when it comes down to the Xbox One X, the design of this was basically stemming off of the Xbox One S. So if you take a look at the Xbox One X and you compare it against the Xbox, One, there's a pretty big design change, right? Those are pretty big design changes for the most part. With the Xbox One S, this was definitely a beautiful console. I love the way the Xbox One S looked, and the One X was basically a more powerful machine at the end of the day. So that console was just going to be more powerful. When you take a look at the front side, you're essentially getting your power button on the front that doubles as the Xbox logo, and then you're also getting a USB port on the front side as well. So that USB port, it's a single USB Type A port. It allows you to go through and plug in your accessories, plug in your cords and all these other things you're going to go ahead and use. And I think that is kind of a nice thing. I always love having a port at the front, and you're essentially getting that inside of your Xbox One X. Now, on top of that, on the back side, you're also getting a fairly powerful type of I/O to choose from as well. So you're still maintaining your AC adapter, you're getting 2 USB-A ports, you're getting your Ethernet port, but then you're also getting 2 HDMI ports. This was always something that a lot of people would have questions on, like why do these consoles have 2 HDMI ports on the backside? And the reason for that was because you could have one port as HDMI in and another port as HDMI out. So if your TV or monitor only had one HDMI port, instead of you having to constantly unplug one and plug in the other, you could just plug in that other device directly into your Xbox One, and it could double as pass-through. So that was something that was very, very cool that you were getting to experience inside of this console. And that's another really big reason why I look at something like an Xbox One X, and I still think this console is actually pretty good, because compared to even the current generation Xbox Series X, that console didn't really have that type of capability, right? The Xbox Series X removed that dual HDMI port kind of thing you could choose from. So that in and of itself was another really interesting thing to kind of think about there as well. So if you're in a situation you wanted to go and pick up a console, well, that right there was a really big thing you can kind of keep in mind with. And I think that in and of itself was another really cool thing to think of mind as well. Now, on top of that, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is basically the fact of the controller. So I always liked the controllers in the Xbox One. I think a lot of people would kind of think about that these controllers were the best controllers in general. And I will probably tell you that's probably true. These controllers were really, really nice. If you were taking a look at the Xbox One X controller, it stemmed from the Xbox One controller, but these were excellent controllers to choose from for the most part. They looked very, very good. They felt very good in the hand, and I do think this was in and of itself another really cool thing to kind of think of, kind of keep in mind here as well. So if you're going to go and kind of take a look at the Xbox One X from the exterior, you have to kind of keep in mind that these were, for the most part, very good looking consoles, and this design language for a lot of people, probably you would look at and still think that this is a current generation console. This is a very good looking device. I genuinely don't think that this is a super old, outdated console by any means. This is still a console that looks very, very good. And I do think that in and of itself is a very cool thing to think about here. Now, taking one step further, if you're going to take a look at this console from a power perspective, this console is still giving you a lot of power to choose from. There's still a lot of capability behind this console. It still does not feel that old. And honestly, even compared to something like an Xbox Series S, this console still actually has a lot of capability. This thing is still giving you 12 gigs of RAM. It's still giving you that custom CPU and GPU inside of it, and you can still, do a lot of stuff inside of this console as well. The only thing is that maybe like the hard drive inside of it is a little bit outdated, considering mostly we have SSDs now. But even then, with a hard drive, this console still is a fairly powerful machine when it comes down to it. And like I said, if you're going to go through and pick up a console and you've never owned an Xbox One before, this thing is still very powerful to kind of keep in mind. When compared to a lot of the competition too, another very big thing to keep in mind here too is that with the Xbox One X, this thing still allows you to do 4K gaming. So you can still output in 4K, which is really, really nice. And if you're going to go and kind of take a look at it against some of the competition, if you're going to have a dedicated gaming console, well, this thing is nice that you can basically output in 4K and HDR. So like I said, that in and of itself is another nice thing. On top of that, this console is backwards compatible. So you do have the option of playing Xbox One games, Xbox 360 games, and you can even play some original Xbox games. So that is a really cool thing to keep in mind here within this console as well. And if I'm going to go through and like pick up a gaming console, backwards compatibility is amazing because there is just so much capability you can kind of throw into. There's just so many games you can play. So I think that in and of itself is another very nice thing to kind of think about here as well. And the fact that this thing still supports a Game Pass, like you can still get access to all those games that are currently on Xbox Game Pass, and you can essentially go through and play all those games. You can still play online with this console as well, which is really, really cool. And it has a disc tray inside of it as well, which might seem kind of random. It's like, why would you even bring that up? Well, with the current generation, the Series S, they do not have a disc tray. The Xbox Series X has one, but the Series S does not actually have one. So that right there is another kind of big advantage for the Xbox One X when it kind of comes down to it as well. So I do think right there in and of itself, if you're going to pick up a console, that is definitely a really cool thing that to kind of keep in mind here with that type of device. And ultimately, if you're looking at the Xbox One X, you have to remember that this console costs significantly cheaper than something like a current generation Xbox Series X or Series S. This is going to be a much cheaper console for the most part, and that's one of the biggest things to keep in mind here. If you're going to go through and pick up a device, it makes a lot of sense to go buy a device that still is going to be giving you software updates, and basically it's still going to be cheap. And that's kind of what's going on here. Maybe there's not the most amount of updates of all time, but there are still some games coming out for this thing. They may not be first party games, but there's still some games out there for this thing. And I do think for the most part, if you're going to go through and pick up a console, this is a decent option if you've never played any Xbox games before. But on the flip side, if you do have some more money to spend, you also have to kind of keep in mind that there are some cons with this. The biggest con with something like the Xbox One X is that there's a very high chance this particular console is not going to have big games coming out for it anytime soon. So it's pretty much done. They're not really prioritizing this console. And when compared to some of the competition like an Xbox Series S or Series X, you're not probably going to be getting the fastest, most powerful console of all time. Because even though this thing is still fast probably for a lot of games, it's not going to be giving you that great of an experience compared to the competition, compared to the new, the successors. So I definitely think there is a place for people to buy this device. If you have more money to spend, go for the Series X or the Series S. But if not, I think the One X is still a very good, very powerful console for the most part. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out, till then.